Nicodemus Minde is a researcher with the East Africa Peace and Security Governance Program at the Institute for Security Studies, and he's joining us live from the capital, Nairobi. Thank you very much for your time as we take in this latest news from Kenya that the police chief has resigned. Just how significant is this, I was going to say latest resignation, but the news on Thursday was of President Ruto sacking his cabinet. Today we have the resignation of the police chief.
Well, I think this is part of this ongoing pressure by the protesters and the country in general for increased accountability for public officials. And the resignation of Japheth Koome, who has been Inspector General of Police almost for 2 years now, is as part of this demands for greater accountability, especially in light of what really happened in the past 3 weeks, where protesters were shot dead. And of course, there was a lot of police brutality. And protesters and the general public have actually been demanding for greater accountability. And this resignation is part of this pressure that the Kenyan officials and the president is really facing at the moment.
And just how much do you think the resignation of the police chief and the sacking of nearly the entire cabinet, how much will that go to allay protesters' demands and fears about this government and its intentions?
So the protesters, the protests which have been led largely by this Generation Z or Gen Z, the youth, have a list of demands. And these demands include, amongst other things, more increased accountability, and especially around the question of justice and historical injustices, which have put pressure on the government led by President Ruto. So the president has been forced yesterday to sack his entire cabinet, which was also part of these protesters' demands. And the protesters are not only demanding for the sacking of the cabinet, but also talking about a return of the loot that was stolen. So there's questions around the corruption that has been ongoing in the country, especially by public officials. So this is part of this broader pressures that they are putting on the president and the government so that they can increase more accountability. And the resignation today by the Inspector General of Police is also part of this ongoing pressure for increased accountability.
Yeah, and Ruto said that he will set up what he called a broad-based government. But what does that mean? Protesters say that they don't trust politicians. They want to see a government made up of technocrats. Is that a solution?
So the broad-based type of government can be interpreted in many ways. So there are those who think a broad-based government would include members of the opposition, of which the president was able to meet with them this week. So that means probably an increase, broad-based in terms of political participation across this political spectra. But there's also a belief that is also going to bring in board specialized the interests of the youth, the interests of other segments of the society, business, and other forms of societal inclusion. So this is what it really means by broad-based. But again, there are those who really cast a lot of doubts on the president.
Yeah, I wonder if that will be enough, because one of the most popular chants by protesters since protests began a few weeks ago has been Ruto must go. We even heard it today in our reporting from Juja outside of Nairobi. Can Ruto win the trust of the people?
I think he's really trying to bring back political legitimacy, which again is hanging by the thread, because the sacking of the cabinet is part of him trying to buy this political legitimacy, which has, of course, in the past 3 weeks almost been taken away from him. So there will be more demands of his resignation. Whether or not he's going to yield to these particular demands will be dependent on a number of reforms that he has to make and meeting part of the demands by these protesters. So this also will determine whether or not this pressure of him to leave or vacate office will happen. But of course, we are seeing that a number of initiatives have been taken, including the sacking, the resignation of the police chief. There have also been, on this particular week, efforts towards addressing, for instance, the institution of an independent electoral body by the assenting through a bill. So these are part of these broad-based reforms that he's really willing. But of course, the legitimacy is also dependent on the people's views, which again, at the moment, he's really struggling to win the hearts of the Kenyan population.
Nicodemus Minde, thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you so much.